The rumble of motorcycles echoed through the dusty streets of Bakersfield, California, as the sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt. It was another scorching July afternoon in 2019, and the Hells Angels clubhouse on the edge of town stood like a fortress, its walls covered in graffiti and warning signs that kept most locals at a safe distance. Inside the fenced compound, chaos reigned. A massive Rottweiler mix, nearly 120 pounds of pure muscle and rage, lunged against a heavy chain attached to a steel post. The dog's name was Phantom, and he had earned his reputation as the most vicious guard dog the club had ever owned. His black coat gleamed in the sunlight, and his yellow eyes burned with an intensity that made even the toughest bikers think twice before approaching. Marcus Reaper Thompson, the club's sergeant-at-arms, stood 15 feet away, his tattooed arms crossed over his leather vest. Blood dripped from a fresh wound on his forearm where Phantom had managed to graze him during the morning feeding. This was the third member injured that week. "We got him from a fighting ring in Fresno 6 months ago," Reaper muttered to his brothers, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes and whiskey. "Thought we could break him, make him loyal, but this beast is beyond saving." The other members nodded grimly. Phantom had attacked everyone who tried to train him. Professional dog handlers had refused to return after their first sessions. The dog lived in a constant state of aggression, barely eating, never sleeping peacefully, always ready to tear apart anything that moved within his reach. 2 miles away, in a rundown apartment complex near the railroad tracks, Sarah Mitchell was doing her best to hold her life together. At 32, she looked older, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her green eyes from working double shifts at the Denny's on Highway 99. Her waitress uniform hung on a chair, stained with coffee and ketchup from the breakfast rush. "Mama, can we get a dog?" Her 7-year-old daughter, Emma, looked up from her coloring book, her big brown eyes full of hope. Sarah's heart clenched. "Baby, we can barely afford food for ourselves right now. A dog needs food, vet visits, all kinds of things we just don't have money for." Emma's face fell, but she didn't argue. She had learned not to ask for much. Her father had left when she was 3, disappearing one night without explanation, leaving Sarah with nothing but debt and broken promises. Since then, every day had been a struggle to keep the lights on and food on the table. Sarah walked to the window and looked out at the neighborhood. It wasn't the worst part of Bakersfield, but it wasn't safe either. Sirens wailed in the distance, a constant soundtrack to their lives. She had grown up in a nice suburb of Sacramento, had gone to community college, had dreams of becoming a veterinary technician. But life had other plans. Now her dreams consisted of making rent on time and maybe saving enough to buy Emma new shoes before school started. That evening, Sarah's shift at Denny's ran late. A group of truckers had come in at midnight, ordering rounds of coffee and pie, leaving decent tips that she desperately needed. By the time she walked home at 2 in the morning, her feet ached and exhaustion pulled at every muscle. As she cut through an alley behind the auto body shop, taking her usual shortcut, she heard it. A low, guttural growling that made her freeze mid-step. Her heart hammered in her chest. In the shadows 30 feet ahead, she could make out a massive shape and the glint of eyes catching the streetlight. "Easy now," she whispered, her voice trembling. She had always had a way with animals, even as a child. While other kids played with toys, she had been the one nursing injured birds back to health, befriending the stray cats that roamed the neighborhood. The growling intensified, the shape moved, and she realized it was a dog, enormous and clearly aggressive. But something in its posture made her pause. Beneath the hostility, she recognized something else. Pain, fear, trauma. "You're scared, aren't you?" she said softly, taking a small step back to show she wasn't a threat. "Someone hurt you bad, didn't they?" The dog's ears twitched. For a split second, the growling subsided. Then voices erupted from nearby, rough male voices shouting commands, and the dog bolted into the darkness, its chain dragging behind it with a metallic scraping sound. "Phantom, get back here, you bastard." The voice belonged to Reaper, who emerged from around the corner with 3 other club members, all carrying heavy ropes and what looked like tranquilizer equipment. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, hoping they wouldn't notice her. The bikers ran past, cursing and shouting, disappearing into the night in pursuit of the escaped dog. When silence returned, Sarah stood there trembling, but not entirely from fear. In that brief moment, she had seen something in that dog's eyes. Something that reminded her of her own reflection when she looked in the mirror after particularly hard days. A soul that was broken but not destroyed. A spirit that was fighting to survive against impossible odds. The next morning, Sarah dropped Emma off at the summer daycare program at the community center, kissing her daughter's forehead before heading to her morning shift. But her mind kept drifting back to those eyes in the alley, that massive dog trembling with rage and fear. During her lunch break, she sat in the staff room scrolling through her phone. Local news sites were buzzing with a story. Dangerous dog escapes Hell's Angels compound. Authorities warn residents. The article included a grainy photo of Phantom and a stern warning from animal control that the dog was extremely aggressive and should not be approached under any circumstances. Sarah stared at the photo. Even in the poor quality image, she could see it. The tension in his jaw, the wild desperation in his posture. This wasn't just an aggressive dog. This was a tortured animal that had learned violence as its only language. That afternoon, she made a decision that everyone would later call crazy. She walked to the Hells Angels clubhouse, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. The iron gate was closed, and two prospects stood guard, their arms crossed, eyeing her suspiciously. "Help you with something, lady?" one of them asked, his tone making it clear she wasn't welcome. "I heard about the dog. I want to help." The prospects exchanged glances and burst out laughing. "You in what army? That beast nearly tore Reaper's arm off yesterday. Animal control won't even take him. They're talking about putting him down." "Then let me try before you do that. Please." Something in her voice made them pause. One of the prospects disappeared inside, and minutes later, Reaper emerged, his bandaged arm visible beneath his cut-off sleeves. "You the crazy woman who wants to deal with Phantom?" His eyes scanned her from head to toe, taking in her cheap sneakers and faded jeans. "What makes you think you can handle what professional trainers couldn't?" Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Because I'm not trying to break him. I'm trying to understand him." Reaper studied her for a long moment. "We caught him this morning. Got him locked in the back kennel. But I'm warning you, he's worse than before. Hasn't eaten in 2 days, won't let anyone within 10 feet. You go in there, you might not come out. I understand the risk." He shook his head but opened the gate. "Your funeral, lady. But when he attacks, don't expect us to save you. We're done getting torn up by that animal." Sarah followed him through the compound, past rows of motorcycles and groups of bikers who stopped their conversations to stare at her. She felt their judgment, their amusement at the foolish woman walking toward her own destruction. The kennel was a concrete structure behind the main building. Even from outside, she could hear Phantom snarling, the sound of his body slamming against the chain-link fence. Reaper unlocked the heavy padlock and stepped back. "Last chance to change your mind." Sarah took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The kennel was dark, lit only by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The smell hit her first: urine, feces, and something else. Desperation. The concrete floor was stained, and in the far corner, Phantom stood rigid, his lips pulled back to reveal teeth meant for killing. Their eyes met. Sarah felt the hair on her arms stand up, but she didn't look away. She had read once that direct eye contact could be seen as a challenge by aggressive dogs. But something told her this moment required honesty, not submission. "I know what they did to you," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. "I know what it feels like when the world turns you into something you never wanted to be." Phantom's growl deepened, his muscles coiling like springs ready to explode. Drool dripped from his jaws. Every instinct screamed at Sarah to run, to get out while she still could. But she didn't move. Instead, she slowly lowered herself to the ground, sitting cross-legged on the filthy concrete. The action was so unexpected that Phantom's growling faltered for just a second. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to train you or break you or make you into anything. I just want you to know that someone sees you, the real you, underneath all this anger. Minutes passed. Phantom didn't attack, but he didn't relax either. His yellow eyes bore into her, searching for the trap, the hidden agenda, the inevitable pain that always followed human contact. Sarah began to talk, her voice soft and steady. She told him about Emma, about working herself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over their heads. She told him about the nights she cried in the bathroom so her daughter wouldn't hear. She told him about feeling trapped, about the rage that sometimes built up inside her when life felt impossibly unfair. They broke you down in those fighting rings, didn't they? Made you think the only way to survive was to be the monster they wanted. But you're exhausted, aren't you? Tired of being afraid, tired of being angry all the time. Something shifted in Phantom's eyes. The tension in his body eased by a fraction. He took one step forward, then stopped, confused by his own actions. If you're feeling something in this moment, if you want to see where this story goes, take a second and subscribe to the channel. Because what happens next, nobody saw coming. Sarah remained perfectly still. Phantom took another step, then another. His growling had stopped completely now, replaced by heavy breathing. He was 3 feet away, close enough to lunge, close enough to end her life in seconds. She slowly extended her hand, palm down, not reaching for him but offering trust, offering understanding, offering the one thing nobody had given him since the day he was stolen from his mother as a puppy. A choice. Phantom's nose twitched. He moved closer, his massive head lowering toward her outstretched hand. Sarah could feel his hot breath on her skin, could see the scars crisscrossing his muzzle from years of fighting. Her hand trembled, but she kept it steady. Then, so gently it seemed impossible from an animal his size, Phantom pressed his nose against her palm. The touch lasted only a second before he jerked back, startled by his own vulnerability. But it was enough. The wall had cracked. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Good boy. You're such a good boy. Outside the kennel, Reaper and half the club had gathered, watching through the window in stunned silence. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. The dog that had sent 3 men to the hospital was standing calmly in front of this woman, his tail no longer rigid with aggression. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah came every day. She brought food that Phantom actually ate, sitting with him while he devoured cheap hot dogs and leftover hamburgers from Denny's. She brought a blanket that smelled like her apartment, something soft in a world that had only given him concrete and chains. She talked to him about everything and nothing, and slowly, Phantom began to trust. The club members watched the transformation with a mixture of awe and disbelief. By the 3rd week, Phantom would let Sarah touch his head, then his back. By the 4th week, he was following her around the compound without a leash, staying close to her side like a shadow. But the real test came on a sweltering August evening. A rival club had shown up at the gates, looking for trouble. Tensions escalated quickly, voices rising, hands moving toward weapons. Sarah happened to be there, having just finished her evening visit with Phantom. When one of the rival bikers made a threatening move toward Reaper, Phantom exploded into action. But instead of mindless violence, he positioned himself between Sarah and the threat. His growl controlled, purposeful. He wasn't attacking. He was protecting. The display was so impressive, so calculated, that even the rival club backed down. They had heard stories about the psychotic dog, but this was different. This was an animal in complete control, choosing when and how to use his power. After they left, Reaper approached Sarah, his expression serious. I've seen a lot of things in my life, but I've never seen anything like what you did with him. He paused, then added, problem is, animal control is still demanding we surrender him. They've got a court order. They're coming tomorrow to take him to be euthanized. Sarah's blood ran cold. No, you can't let them do that. We don't have a choice. He's still registered as a dangerous animal. Unless someone adopts him and takes full responsibility, he's done. Sarah looked at Phantom, who was lying peacefully at her feet. Her mind raced through the impossibilities. Her landlord didn't allow dogs. She could barely feed herself and Emma. How could she possibly take on a 120-pound Rottweiler? But when she looked into those yellow eyes, she saw her answer. I'll take him. The next 72 hours were a blur of impossible decisions and desperate phone calls. Sarah's landlord initially refused, threatening eviction if she brought a dog anywhere near the property. But when she explained Phantom's story, showed him videos she had recorded on her phone of the transformation, something softened in the old man's hardened exterior. 1-month trial period. One complaint from neighbors, one incident, and you're both out. Understood? Sarah nodded, relief flooding through her. She had already withdrawn the small emergency fund she had been saving, money she had hoped would go toward Emma's school supplies. Instead, it went to adoption fees, veterinary checkups, vaccinations, and a mountain of dog food. The Hells Angels, in an unprecedented move, helped. Reaper showed up at her apartment with a truck full of supplies. A heavy-duty bed, bowls, toys, even a leash that could actually hold Phantom if needed. We take care of our own, he said gruffly. And somehow you became one of us. Emma's reaction was pure magic. When Sarah brought Phantom home that first evening, her daughter's eyes went wide with wonder. This is our dog? Really, Mama? Phantom approached Emma carefully, his movements gentle and deliberate. When the little girl threw her arms around his neck, something shifted in the dog's expression. For perhaps the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be loved without conditions, without violence, without pain. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Phantom had nightmares, waking up growling and disoriented. There were moments when Sarah questioned if she had made a terrible mistake. But each time doubt crept in, Phantom would do something that reminded her why she had fought so hard for him. He walked Emma to the bus stop every morning, positioning himself between her and the street. When Sarah worked late shifts, he stayed by the door, waiting patiently for her return. When the apartment above them caught fire one October night, it was Phantom's insistent barking that woke them in time to evacuate safely. The fire department praised the dog as a hero. The local news picked up the story. Former fighting dog saves family from fire. Suddenly, Sarah's phone was flooded with messages. People wanted to know more about Phantom, about how she had transformed him. But the most important transformation wasn't Phantom's. It was Sarah's own. Taking responsibility for this broken animal had given her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She started volunteering at the animal shelter on her days off, working with dogs that others had given up on. Her dream of becoming a veterinary technician, long buried under the weight of survival, began to resurface. One evening in late November, as Sarah sat on the couch with Emma curled up on one side and Phantom's massive head resting on her lap, she realized something profound. She had saved Phantom's life, yes, but in doing so, he had saved hers too. He had reminded her that broken things could heal, that second chances were real, that love could triumph over even the darkest past. 3 years later, Sarah stood in front of the Bakersfield Animal Rescue Center, a modest building on the east side of town that she now managed. The morning sun cast warm light across the freshly painted walls, and the sign above the door read, Second Chances Sanctuary, no animal left behind. Phantom, now a certified therapy dog, sat calmly beside her as a local television crew set up their equipment. At 10 years old, he had gray around his muzzle, but his eyes still held that same intensity, now tempered with wisdom and peace. So, Sarah, the reporter began, her camera rolling. 3 years ago, you were a single mom working double shifts just to survive. Now you run one of the most successful animal rehabilitation programs in California. How did this happen? Sarah smiled, running her hand through Phantom's fur. It started with one choice. One moment when I decided that a broken soul deserved a chance, even when everyone said it was impossible. That choice changed everything. The center had started small, funded by donations that poured in after Phantom's story went viral. The Hells Angels became unexpected supporters, hosting charity rides that raised thousands of dollars. Reaper served on the board of directors, his tough exterior hiding a surprisingly soft heart for animals in need. Emma, now 10 years old, had become the center's youngest volunteer. She spent her afternoons after school helping socialize the rescue dogs, her gentle nature inherited from her mother. She had a special connection with the most difficult cases, the ones that reminded Sarah of Phantom when she first met him. Sarah had also finished her veterinary technician certification, taking online classes late at night after Emma went to bed. The degree hung proudly on her office wall, next to dozens of photos of dogs they had saved and successfully rehomed. But Phantom remained with them, of course. He had become the center's ambassador, proving to every scared, aggressive, traumatized dog that came through their doors that transformation was possible. When new rescues arrived, snarling and terrified, Phantom would approach with calm confidence, and somehow they would respond. It was as if they recognized a fellow survivor. The interview wrapped up, and as the crew packed their equipment, a young woman approached nervously. She held the leash of a pit bull mix that was pulling and lunging aggressively. "Please," the woman said, tears in her eyes. "Animal control says they have to put him down. But I know he's not a bad dog. He's just scared. Everyone says it's hopeless, but I heard about what you did with Phantom. Can you help?" Sarah looked at the terrified dog, then at Phantom, who was already moving forward with that same gentle purpose. She thought about the scared waitress she used to be, working herself to exhaustion, feeling hopeless and alone. She thought about the moment in that dark alley when she had seen past the monster to the broken soul beneath. "Of course we can help," Sarah said softly. "Nothing is ever truly hopeless. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to look a little deeper, to see what everyone else missed." Phantom pressed against her leg, and in that moment, Sarah knew exactly what he would say if he could speak. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. If the story touched your heart, if you believe in second chances and the power of compassion, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share your own stories of rescue and redemption in the comments below. What animal changed your life? What moment made you believe in the impossible? Thank you for watching until the end. Your support allows us to keep sharing these stories of hope and transformation. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next inspiring journey. And remember, sometimes the most broken things become the most beautiful when given a chance to heal. See you in the next story, and never stop believing in second chances.